what's going on, everybody? PFR Nation. This is Kevin Lau, your host of the Planning for Retirement podcast, and this is episode number 63. Save more money, your top New Year's resolution for 2025. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are weekly. I know I just teased this the last episode that we were going to be going weekly in the first quarter, and I just thought, why wait? Let's just get the ball rolling. So here we are, just a few short days later, coming up the heels of episode number 62, the benefits of working in retirement. But I just wanted to address this. Why am I going weekly? Okay, so first and foremost, you've probably heard me tease this for the last year. Okay, it's been on my heart for a while. Just have ideas flowing. We're full on in this retirement planning business. Okay, so every single day I'm running across, whether it's actual client case studies or things that I read about retirement planning. So there's just so much out there that I want to deliver in terms of value to you, PFR Nation. And so I just figured, hey, listen, I've got all these ideas that I want to talk about. So why every other week is just not going to cut it? Okay. So just a reminder for all of you PFR Nation type of caliber individuals. So this channel, this show, this podcast is for those of you that are over the age of 50. You are not underachievers by any stretch. Okay, many of you have already exceeded 7 figures of investable assets for retirement and pushing mid 7 figures, upwards of 8 figures. And you're looking to figure out, hey, when can I become work optional? Okay, when can I fire my boss? And I also just want to remind you, so not only follow the podcast, but also to make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All right. So in addition to the podcast going weekly, and by the way, this is Tuesday. Okay, if you haven't noticed, so this is coming into your podcast streaming on Tuesday weekly. So we are changing up the day from Thursday. So just an FYI, I know this is going to be a game changer for a lot of you, okay, because you're all about the show here. But listen, Tuesday morning, we're going to be releasing the podcast, but then we're also on the YouTube going to continue to do our, what I'm going to call side chats. Okay, so right now they've been these whiteboard fireside chats. A couple of the ones that we just put out there, one was a big hit. Okay, y'all really found a lot of value. And this was this idea of not missing what we like to call your Roth conversion window. And so understand, okay, what is the Roth conversion window and how does this apply to you in terms of when you should start converting some of those tax deferred assets into Roth? And then another whiteboard fireside chat that I just released this week was just avoiding this idea of double income taxes on IRA distributions. Okay, I understand it's a little clickbaity, but this is legit. Okay, this is one of those things that we run into for a lot of our clients that are now taking required minimum distributions. And let's say they don't need all of those RMDs. Maybe their RMD is $100,000, $150,000 per year. And they say, you know what, Kevin, with Social Security, maybe they're lucky enough to have a pension. That takes care of a nice little baseline. Maybe I only need $50,000 of my RMD. Well, the remainder you still have to take out. Otherwise, you're going to get hit with a 25% penalty. And now they're going to go ahead and reinvest those assets on an after-tax basis into a trust account or a brokerage account. Need to make sure we protect against the tax drag on those particular investments because the tax implication of those investments now matters. Whereas when those assets were inside of an IRA or tax deferred vehicle like a 401k plan, didn't matter. Okay, because any interest income or dividends that you receive are not taxable. Okay, so make sure to subscribe to the YouTube. We're going to continue to do those side chats. And I'm also going to do a little parlay of some link side chats. That's going to come in 2025 as well, where part of the initiative here is to get my butt out of the office more. I think I mentioned I logged 9 rounds in 2024. That's just not acceptable. So I just want to get out there, play a little bit more golf when the weather gets a little warmer. And I'm going to be doing a little a link side chat. Just those whiteboard fireside chats, the link side chats, these overall side chats is really just going to be an extension of the podcast, kind of going a little deeper into a particular topic that we may have talked about in the podcast or just in our financial planning practice in general. Okay. Speaking of YouTube real quick, I hope you guys like my sweatshirt here. I'm rocking the Provide and Protect sweatshirt. And for those of you that don't know about Provide and Protect, it's a YouTube channel that is run by my brother-in-law, Brian Cosby. So make sure to check out his channel. If you're like a manly man, if you're into the outdoors and building things with your hands and tools and guns and how to make a fire. There's so many great videos that he's put out there, and I'm super proud of what he's building over there on his YouTube channel. So make sure to check that one out. Again, Provide and Protect. For those of you that are not watching on video, I'm rocking the sweatshirt today. So I mentioned the content ideas are flowing. I'm excited about going weekly. So why now? I think, like I mentioned this past episode when I had Roberto on to chat about the working in retirement was really just this idea of freeing up my time to focus on what I really, really love about this business and financial planning and ultimately helping people plan for retirement. And over the last year, 2024 was a pretty chaotic year. I'm bringing two people onto my team. In March, we hired Amy Levesque. She's our client services associate. She's just really triaging anything that needs to happen behind the scenes. When someone becomes a client, okay, now they're part of the IFS family. Amy's taking care of all of the back end details to make sure that their accounts get set up at Schwab, that the transfers happen properly, et cetera, et cetera. And then 2 months later, Roberto came along. Okay. He was just like Amy. He was also a gift from above. And Roberto came along and I said, okay, hey, listen, we've got something going here. Okay. We're starting to build out this team. And I feel like 2024 was a lot of grunt work to getting them up to speed, training them, et cetera. So I just didn't feel like I had the capacity to not step away from my business, but take the time to do the content frequency that I wanted to do in 2024. Although every other week, that was a pretty nice cadence, relative to what we did in 2023. So 2024 was phenomenal. But listen, the algorithm is speaking to us. It's saying, listen, people are liking your stuff. They're finding value in your stuff. I need to lean into this and go full time on this every week, not full time, but every week. And I thought, hey, 2025 was a great opportunity to do this just because I feel like we've got the business running like a well-oiled machine, in terms of delivering value to our clients. We've got some consistent cadence touch points throughout the year. We've got our early year review. We've got our fall reviews for end of year tax planning. And I feel like we've got this thing going here. We've got this thing moving on the business side. And I just feel like now my time is a little bit more freed up where I could focus on this content. So I'm super, super excited. So thank you, Roberto. Thank you, Amy, for all of the work you do for our clients and for freeing up my time to do what I love and focus on my unique ability. Speaking of Roberto, so I just finished up listening to the last episode this morning, and because I'm recording this on Thursday when it came out. So today's January 23rd. And I just want to thank y'all for listening to that episode. I thought it was great. I thought it was phenomenal. Just understand, sort of listening to some of those, not only the financial benefits of quote unquote working in retirement. And when we say working, we're more talking about just having purpose in retirement. But I just loved not only the financial aspects, which are obvious, or maybe some are obvious, maybe some are not, but also more of the purpose in retirement. And ultimately, having purpose in retirement impacts your physical health, could impact your potential mental health as well. So if you haven't listened to that episode, just go back. That's episode 662. Make sure to give that a listen because, I took a ton of nuggets away just listening to it again. Because, obviously when I'm recording, I'm in the zone, just trying to focus on what we're doing, and going back and listening to the show for the second time, or really the first time just as a listener, I found a lot of value. So again, make sure to check that one out. And finally, before we jump in, or actually real quick on that one, Roberto was getting super worked up about this one. I just have to bring this up. He was very nervous about coming on the podcast, by the way. He was trying to make every excuse to not come on. He was like, hey, maybe we should wait, or maybe we should wait until the perfect topic. I'm like, listen, people that are waiting for the perfect time are still waiting for the perfect time. There is no perfect time. So he was super anxious on that one. But I told him, hey, Roberto, you don't need to sweat it because nobody's listening anyway. So we're good. We're good there. Last thing before we jump into today's episode, I want to get real here. So many of you are over 50. Okay. I look at the demographics on Spotify. I track who you are. I know you. Okay. But many of you are over 50, and many of you have already surpassed that $1 million mark. And you're kind of feeling like, hey, what is possible? When can I potentially fire my boss? When can I potentially retire? Are we tracking to have enough? With inflation, how it's been, is this enough? How can I actually replace my working paycheck with a retirement paycheck? Or, hey, what's going on with the markets? We've had this run over the last decade plus since post Great Recession. What if we don't have a market like we had over the last 10 years over the next decade? Could I still retire? Or what if taxes go up in the future? Or Social Security gets cut? What if we get sick and need long-term care? There's so many of these things that are running people through our clients and prospects' minds. And this is probably also on your mind as well. Okay, like I said, if you're listening to this in the PFR Nation sweet spot, these are probably issues that are on your mind as well. So what I'm going to offer up to you, if you're interested in learning about what it would be like to work with our firm one-on-one, we have a retirement readiness questionnaire. I'm going to call it the RRQ. It's going to be linked in the show notes. And it's just a short questionnaire. We don't need any financial statements. We don't even need any personally identifiable information. We just want to learn a little bit more about you, what you're trying to accomplish. And then I will personally follow up with a video recording on Zoom just about some of your plans, your goals, et cetera, how I feel about those plans and goals, and then also potentially where we can add value if we were to engage in a relationship. So So again, if you're interested in that, just make sure to check out our show notes for the link for that retirement readiness questionnaire. All right, so why don't we get into this topic here? So top New Year's resolution of 2025. I pulled this up from Statista. I think that's how you pronounce it. Statista did a little survey from y'all. And the ages range, frankly, it was a pretty broad range of individuals, but it was 18 to 80. So basically adults that are still alive. And the number one resolution was to save more money. 21% of individuals said they wanted to save more money. The number two as a close number two, eat healthier. That was at 19%. And then exercise more at 17%, lose weight. You can kind of parlay that with the same one, maybe 15%. Spend more time with family and friends, 14%. Quit smoking, 9%. And then to reduce spendings on living expenses like food and energy. So that's interesting. I mean, save more money. You can kind of parlay that with that objective as well. But what was also interesting is that 43% said, I'm not making a resolution. And that made me laugh because that's me right there. Okay. I am not a New Year's resolution kind of guy. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, I've done these in the past. I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to say, hey, Kevin, what are your New Year's resolutions? And it was always one of those things like I love goal setting. No question. I love the goal setting. But I think really what changed my mindset on New Year's resolutions was back in this was probably 2010, 2011-ish. One of my mentors was freshly minted in the business. He said, Kevin, you need to read this book by Brian Moran. It's called The 12-Week Year. And that book just kind of changed everything for me when it came to just goal setting and planning, because like the message it resonated so well because it was like, companies that operate on a 12-month year. Okay. So, which is pretty much everybody, everyone has that mindset of, okay, we have an annual goal. We're going to set annual goals. Okay. Not just corporations, but individuals. What happens is you kind of have this feeling of, I got plenty of time. We're just getting started. It's only January. I got plenty of time to achieve these goals. And you kind of kick the can down a couple of months. And all of a sudden now it's March or April. And you're like, all right, maybe I need to get a little bit serious, but we still got a little bit of time. And then all of a sudden now it's September and the fourth quarter is about to start. And then you go crazy, gangbusters. You're pushing forward towards your goals, whether that be exercising goals or business goals or financial goals, whatever that might be. You're pushing hard to achieve those. And then maybe you were lucky enough, you were fortunate enough to just hit those goals, because you were just muscling it. But then what happens in January is you're like, oh man, I am defeated. Okay. I just felt like I just ran a marathon in 3 months or 2 months or whatever you did. We're all procrastinators. Okay. And so that message to me was like, listen, instead of setting 12-month goals, no question, we're going to have these targets out there for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. Truthfully, my target is more like a 3-year target these days. And then what I like to do is then I like to set 12-week action plans. Okay. So these 12-week action plans have nothing to do with the results. Okay. So if you kind of think of this from like a financial planning perspective, like you may have the goal of to hit like $1 million in assets. Okay. So that's uncontrollable because what if the market dips by 10 or 15% over the next year or two? And then all of a sudden you were doing the things you needed to do, saving and investing wisely, cutting your expenses, but you still didn't hit your goal. That's uncontrollable. So the 12-week year process is just focusing on controllables, okay, that you can control, that you have full control over. So like your savings rate, like your investment strategy, like your process to manage your finances, okay, tracking cash flow. These are controllables. And so this is really what changed for me and why I don't set New Year's resolutions is like, I kind of operate in this this is how I operate in this 12-week year mindset where every 12 weeks is a new year. And I'm going to reevaluate the tactics that I put into play. And generally, I keep it to 1 to 3. That's what Brian Moran recommends in the book. Don't go crazy in terms of having 10 goals, because then you're not going to achieve any of them. All right. And studies have shown, like, if you're laser focused on 1, 2, maybe 3 things at the most, you're going to be so much more efficient and so much more focused. And so that's personally what I like to do. So yeah, I'm in that 43% that I did not technically make a New Year's resolution. However, budgeting was definitely one of those things for my wife and I, we've been working on over the last few months. And I'm going to talk more about that as we go along here. But the message is clear, I think, from this study by Statista. People are all of you, PFR Nation, individuals, Americans in general, looking to save more money. Saving more money is the goal, okay? But I feel like that's more of the uncontrollable, okay? Some of those things may be under control, but there's other things that may pop up unexpectedly. For my family, it's like ER visits every couple of months. It's ridiculous. But I'm here to tell you that understanding your cash flow is the key to saving more. So how do you understand your cash flow? Budgeting. Okay. So very plain and simple. If you're going to achieve this goal of saving more, okay, you need a budget. Okay. And the stats are all over the place on this one. Anywhere from 32% to 90% of people have budgets. So like, I have no idea. I mean, I was researching this online. I'm like, it seems like it depends on the sample size, and who you're talking to. I feel like with PFR Nation, I know you all a little bit better. Okay. So I'm going to guess that it's closer to that 90% range, like in terms of you all that actually have a somewhat of a framework of a budget. But according to the Gallup survey, 32% of American households have a written budget or use software to plan their spending. Bankrate survey says 82% of Americans have a household budget, but only 36% use paper and pencil. I'm like, paper and pencil, come on now. Like, at least use Excel, if you're going to do it that way. Investopedia, 74% of Americans have a budget, and then debt.com, and 90% of Americans surveyed in 2024 reported budgeting their money. So I would say many of you listening, most of you listening, I would say the majority probably have some sort of framework of a budget. Okay. But my experience as well, having done this for close to 17 years, is individuals typically lack clarity about how their cash flow is going to get them to where they're trying to go. Okay. And for the PFR podcast here, we're talking about retirement goals. We're talking about work optional. Okay. So understanding your cash flow in terms of backing into, hey, where am I spending and how much do I need to direct towards my longer term goals, in addition to obviously taking care of my short term and intermediate term goals? But how much do I need to direct long term in order to achieve work optional? This is where I think a lot of people are missing the boat here. Okay. And if you don't necessarily know specifically how much you're going to need in retirement, it's going to be impossible to have a savings goal. Like, you're just kind of throwing darts at that point. And obviously, if you're saving something, probably better than nothing. But if you have a very clear number in terms of, hey, I need to save $40,000 a year over the next decade to get to work optional, or I need to save $60,000 a year over the next 5 years, and now I'm going to be in a position where I can fire my boss. Okay, you're going to have much more purpose. You're going to have a lot more energy around your cash flow and your budget. Okay, and of course, more importantly, don't just save. Okay, you need to also invest wisely. Okay, savings is not going to get you anywhere. Saving money in your checking account or savings account or money market account, that's not going to keep pace with inflation. You're going to lag inflation. You're going to lose money. And ultimately, you're also going to pay taxes on that, okay? Because it's going to be, taxed at your highest marginal rate. So not only save money, but also invest money. And I like to sort of break down in terms of expenses, fixed expenses, variable expenses, and then 100% discretionary. In other words, needs, wants, and wishes, okay? And this will kind of get you dialed in terms of, okay, hey, you know what? Based on these numbers, here's how much I need to have in retirement. And therefore, how am I tracking relative to that goal? Okay. So why don't we talk a little about a few things that I have found personally with my family and with clients, working with clients. I put down 5 things that individuals that we serve and even my personal family in terms of benefits of having a budget. I think the first one I'm going to throw out there is it increases clarity. Okay. So in terms of increasing clarity, you've got to go backwards. Okay. You need to go backwards and know your numbers. It's like the Shark Tank. If you kind of come in the Shark Tank as an entrepreneur and you kind of throw out all these cool features and facts about your product or service, and then Kevin O'Leary, like, what are your sales? Like, what are your numbers? Like, if you don't know your numbers, you're done. You're toast. Okay, so looking backwards at your budget, at your expenses, is going to give you that framework to go forward. Okay, and then also that's going to drive, like we just mentioned, how much do you need to save annually for retirement? How much do you need to budget towards debt? How much do you need to budget towards short-term goals? Maybe it's education for your children or emergency funds or home repairs, okay? So I think that clarity is key. And then number 2, that clarity leads to confidence, okay? I'm just telling you, this has been a game changer for my family and I, all right? So my budgeting journey has been kind of all over the place, and I feel like in 2011, 2012, probably closer to 2013, I should say, I personally had a negative net worth. I was not budgeting very well. I was in my early 20s. I was making pretty good money and just being stupid. Okay. So I was not budgeting very well. I had a negative net worth. Okay. So 2013, 2014, I started to get really serious about this and say, I'm going to get out of debt and I'm going to start to save and invest aggressively. So I'm just telling you, that has been a game changer for my family in terms of increasing that confidence and that clarity. And ultimately, that has allowed me to step away, fire my boss in 2020 and start my own business. Obviously, I'm not work optional or probably wouldn't be doing this, but ultimately it allowed me to fire my boss and start my own company just because I was so aggressive with my saving and investing for about 7 to 8 years, okay, before quitting my day job. So, I think that increasing confidence is a big one. And, ultimately, that also allowed us like that clarity to sort of dedicate a certain dollar amount to each goal that we had, in terms of like long-term goals, intermediate term goals, short-term goals. At the time, it was, hey, we wanted to buy a house, did that in 2017-ish. Yeah, that was 2017. And then we wanted to start a family, and that we were blessed enough to have that happen in 2020, 2019, 2020, and then start a company. So I had some different savings targets. I wasn't just focused on retirement saving. I also wanted to build up a little bit of a war chest to prepare for this moment of 2020 when I ultimately did quit my W-2 gig and start my own company. So for PFR Nation, you might have some different goals. And so that clarity and confidence is going to allow you to say, hey, what dollar, let's give every dollar a purpose, and let's start putting this into play, and let's start tracking this thing. The third thing I'll throw out there, this is critical. If you are married or you have a partner, it can potentially improve communication about money. And so I'm talking to all of you married people, folks that have partners that you kind of doing some joint finances with. Married people fight all the time about their budget, okay? And I'm just telling you because I'm a financial planner, and I hear this all the time in meetings where it's like, Kevin, tell my spouse to stop doing this, or tell my spouse to start doing this. And it can get a little awkward. It can get a little testy in those meetings, but they happen probably more frequently than you would imagine. All right. So I feel like our clients share stuff with me that they probably don't even share with like their closest friends or family members, because we're a third party, we're objective, we're not running around, we keep confidentiality we're very, very keen on keeping confidentiality with our clients, even though if they refer us to friends or family members, which they do, but they're comfortable sharing these things. And I think these conversations come up time and time again. And we've all heard the stats around divorce and how married finances is a very, very common reason for married couples to get a divorce. And so I'd say increasing that communication, if you're married or have a partner, is so key. And generally, from my experience, you kind of have one spouse who's sort of like that CFO spouse. I like to joke like they're kind of the dictators, of the budget. And that's kind of me, you know what I mean? My wife's an English lit major. She could care less about the budget, okay? And if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you are probably that CFO dictator as well. And so, my question is like, how have you brought in the non-CFO into the conversation? How have you broached this topic of budgeting or cash flow? Okay. And how did that go for you? All right. I know for me, okay, so my wife used to work full time and she had a pretty nice little gig. So again, that really helped us from 2013 to 2020 before starting my business. It wasn't just my income we were saving, it was also her income as well. And we were able to save a lot of our income. We were probably hitting about a 45% gross income savings rate, which for a good saver, 20% is a pretty darn good saver. And so, I think for us, it was my wife then stayed home with the kids. Once we had our first child, she was like, hey, I'm going to do this, stay at home. We're very blessed, to be in that position. And then when I started my own business, it got a little crazy there because we were living on savings for about 3 years, until I really replaced my income in 2024. And so it was kind of one of those things where it was like, this is a little uncomfortable. We're burning down our savings. But my wife, she's in the trenches with the kids. Like she's taking care of the kids. I'm trying to run this business. I'm trying to manage our personal finances, et cetera. And so bringing up budgeting to her to be like, hey, what are you doing spending on this? That didn't go over very well. All right. And so I'll talk a little about here in a second what we've done over the last few months that has been a game changer for us. But just I think bringing this topic of conversation could be a testy one. And sometimes that might be valuable to bring in a third party, an objective third party. Okay. Truthfully, I know for a fact, there have been clients, I'm thinking about them right now, who literally hired me, okay, just because I was an objective third party and they could sort of, they could kind of bounce off their issues with me. Okay. Now I'm not a therapist. All right. So I'm not a licensed therapist here. I'm not a marriage counselor. But with regards to the money, once we kind of increase that confidence and clarity with regards to what they're trying to accomplish, then we can bring up the communication and kind of bring us all on the same page. Because I think we all want to work towards the same goals, hopefully. If you're in a marriage or a relationship where you're not working towards the same goals, going to be a problem. You're going to need to work on that probably with a marriage counselor, okay, with a therapist. But if you're kind of generally, you're like, yeah, we're kind of rowing in the same direction. It's just hard to bring up money conversations. Absolutely. That's probably a good reason to hire a third-party financial planner, okay? And of course, one that is very keen, very specialized in retirement income planning, because the accumulation phase is very different than the distribution phase. The number 4 benefit that I've seen personally and with our clients just trims the fat. All right. No more unnecessary purchases, no recurring subscriptions that you forgot you were using. And it's just increased scrutiny on the monthly expenses that you have going on. Like, what are needs? What are wants? What are wishes? Okay. Now, obviously the needs, there may be some wiggle room, but maybe not a lot. I think the wiggle room happens in those wants and wishes. And it's also it's very important to sort of understand, like, hey, what are the wants and what are the wishes? And are some of those wants truly wants, or are they actually needs? Okay. I think a lot of people will say, oh, I really, I'd like to travel in retirement, but those are more wants or wishes. Let's just kind of put the minimum expenses here. But I'm like, if you're going to quit your job that you've worked for the last 25 to 30 years to retire, you probably are going to want to travel. And if you can't travel, you're probably not going to retire. Doesn't that make sense? So I think you need to really understand, like, what are those needs? What are those wants? What are those wishes? But for us, kind of the aha moment for my family was just like looking at like the shopping budget, the groceries budget, the entertainment budget, and then those unnecessary purchases, and like really scrutinizing those and like really dialing in. And I just know for a fact over the last few months, since we've been increasing our communication on this one, it's just been such a game changer with my wife and I in terms of our communication and kind of rowing in that same direction. But trimming the fat is a big one. And then number 5, I would say most importantly, PFR Nation, this is going to be the framework for the most important assumption in your retirement plan. Okay. How much are you going to need to spend in retirement? Like, if you don't know your cash flow now, when you retire, how do you know how much income you're going to need to replace? Okay. And ultimately what that spending strategy is, right? Like, when do you take Social Security, right? What's the timing of that? What's your rate of withdrawal from your investments over different phases in retirement? Okay. Should you annuitize a portion of your portfolio, right? And then ultimately, how much risk do you need to take in your portfolio in order to make your financial plan work? In other words, what's your required rate of return? You know what I mean? Like, if the more well-funded you are, the lower your required return might be, but maybe the more lean you are, the higher required return you might need. So none of that is going to be helpful unless you understand what your cash flow is today and ultimately projecting forward what that budget is going to look like in retirement. Okay. So those are those 5 benefits that I've seen. Now, to kind of help you with this 2025, with this New Year's resolution, because I guarantee you, for most of you listening, this is important to you. Creating a budget, managing your cash flow, tracking your cash flow. So I'm going to teach you 4 different frameworks of budgeting, all right, that, some I've used personally, some I've just more read about, but hopefully this kind of helps you sort of get those wheels turning a little bit, and you can sort of see, hey, which one resonates with me, which one resonates with, my spouse and I. And ultimately, hey, how do we bring this to life? How do we bring this to life within our own financial planning? So the first one is a very popular methodology. It's known as the 50-30-20 method. Okay. And so the 50-30-20 method essentially just earmarks a percentage of your total cash flow, net cash flow, to certain goals, okay, to certain items. So again, kind of thinking about those needs, wants, wishes. It says 50% goes to the needs, 30% goes to the wants, and then 20% kind of goes to the wishes. But in this case, we're talking about the 20% going towards saving, investing, paying down debt. So it kind of creates this really simple framework to say, hey, here's how much we're bringing in every single month. Let's say we allocated 50% towards those wants. How are we tracking related to that? Are we high or are we low? It's like things like housing, transportation, food, utilities, clothing. I mean, I would probably throw all those in the need category. How are you kind of stacking up? Is it 50%? Is it 40%? Great. Maybe you've got a little bit more room to save a little bit more. So instead of 20% saving, now you can bump that up to 30. Okay. On the flip side, maybe your needs are closer to 60%. You're like, hey, well, how can we maybe trim some of this? How do we bring down our expenses a little bit more? Right. But I love this simple framework of this 50-30-20 budget to kind of compare or sort of benchmark where you're spending to other people. Because I think this is, truthfully, I've been doing this for 17 years and this is pretty spot on, I would say, for the most part. Now, some people, again, the definition of needs versus wants, it kind of blends together a little bit, I think, especially for retirement planning, because we're not just trying to retire like just to kind of have the bare minimum lifestyle. Like, if you're going to become work optional and ultimately fire your boss, like, you want to kind of maintain the lifestyle that you've become accustomed to. So I think sort of, again, understanding what those wants are, what those needs are, what those wishes are, and being super honest about that will really help you. But hopefully that 50-30-20 framework is a good starting point. And NerdWallet, they have a budgeting app. I'm going to kind of plug some budgeting apps as we go along. And theirs is based on that 50-30-20 approach. The second method is the envelope system, okay, or cash stuffing. Now this was made, I think really Dave Ramsey is the one that coined this one. Now Dave Ramsey, listen, love him or hate him, he's made a pretty big impact on the personal finance world. Right? He's helped millions of people get out of debt. I talked to countless people that have either read his books or implemented his philosophies and his strategies. And this envelope system is very, very popular. Okay. Now, to be truthful with you, I've never implemented this personally. Okay. Nor have I seen it in action, maybe because like everything's digital now in terms of using currency and, stuffing cash in an envelope. That just seems a little bit archaic to me. But listen, if you need a rigid system to help you stop spending money frivolously or stay out of debt, and you don't want to like track every purchase and you don't want to use the online apps, like this is probably a good method to think through. And essentially really what it is like first of all, you look at all of the categories of your spending. You could say, food or transportation or housing or utilities, internet and cable, entertainment. I don't know if I said entertainment already, but whatever those categories are for you, travel, you set up a little envelope for each of those. And you literally each month or each week or every other week, depending on how you're getting paid, you literally stuff cash for each of those budgets in an envelope. All right. Again, this is probably why I haven't used it. I'm like a geriatric millennial. You know what I mean? So we sort of grew up without technology, but then got it when we were in high school, college. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, like for me, this method seems a little bit dated. However, there are apps out there that sort of use this. I think one of the apps that I looked at was the Good Budget app. That is an app literally based on the envelope system. Okay. And another one, YNAB, which I'll talk about here in a second. That's another really good app that you can use for budgeting. But ultimately, once the cash runs out of that envelope, you cannot spend anything else in that category. So like if you had some cash in there for medical, right, and all of a sudden unexpected medical expense popped up, you're going to have to really be honest about what you're going to do there. Now, obviously, you're going to have to take cash from another envelope and put it in there. So again, this system, for me, it's not for me, but for a lot of you, it could be very, very useful. And again, this has helped millions of people. Okay, millions of people have been reading Ramsey's books and implementing his stuff. So it obviously works well. And so I don't want to like downplay this method. I think this method actually is very, very powerful. And again, that Good Budget app, if you're like, hey, I don't want to stuff cash in an envelope, but I kind of like this idea, this framework of the envelope system, maybe check out that app and see how that works. I haven't checked it out personally, but probably could. I'm sure it's pretty good. NerdWallet is the one that suggested that one. All right, the third system that I'll throw out there is this reverse budget. Okay, essentially this pay yourself first methodology of budgeting. Okay, now this is the one that I use personally from 2013, 2014 through 2020. This is what we used to do. Okay, we first look backwards and gain clarity. Now, I think that's key to sort of note is like a lot of people sort of throw this system out there and they're like, you don't even need to like track your expenses. Just set a savings target or a target for debt repayment and just do that. And then everything else just spend. I think you first need to look backwards, okay? Because you need to get clear on where your money's going now. And you need to get clear on, hey, what are those needs? What are those wants? What are those wishes? And where can we potentially trim the fat? But once you have those broken down, okay, and then more importantly, you sort of start to project forward with the framework of, hey, here's how much I might need to spend in retirement, okay, or this work optional phase. That way you can kind of back into how much money do you need to save in order to achieve work optional, okay? That's most likely going to be your number one savings target and investing target. Maybe it's also paying down your mortgage. So maybe that combination of those two of like, hey, we want to aggressively fund retirement and aggressively pay down debt. Here's how much we need to allocate to those specific goals. So the reverse budgeting method, you essentially, every time you get paid, you do that first. You do that first, and then you kind of know, hey, I've got, hopefully, again, tracking backwards, hopefully you've got enough left over in there to take care of your needs and take care of even some of those discretionary items. But I think really what was cool about this one was it really kind of helped us eliminate any sort of guilt of like enjoying our lifestyle. It's like, I think like a lot of these budgeting coaches and just, books, it's like, don't spend $5 at Starbucks. Like, not that I like to do that personally. I think I'd rather make my coffee at home, but I think a lot of people are like, save $5 a day over 30 days. You're going to now be set for retirement. Like, don't spend money. It's like, if you go into Starbucks is adding value to your morning, like you don't have to make that cup of coffee at the house, and that's saving you time. And you sort of like that experience. Maybe you're doing some work at the coffee shop every day. I don't have to use Starbucks. Maybe it's a coffee shop, a local coffee shop that you're supporting. Like, you don't have to just like be guilted into like, hey, I need to cut everything. I need to cut everything out of my budget. And so I think this reverse budgeting method really helps that. Is again, once you have that framework of clarity and where you've come from, now you can say, hey, here's how much I need to allocate to achieve my work optional goal in terms of my retirement goal, or here's how much I need to allocate towards paying down my mortgage aggressively. Well, now you can kind of just let the rest happen, like spend the rest. Obviously, you don't want to go negative on your checking account balances and overspending your credit cards. So you still need to track these expenses. And that's why I say, like, people out there kind of say, oh, you don't need to track any, dollar amounts. I do think at some point, I do remember at some point, it kind of just felt like it was a little automated for us, but it took about a year or two to really kind of sort of build this muscle, build this sort of saving and investing first mentality. And like I said, we were pushing some years. I remember we were saving about 40% of our gross income to really aggressively save and prepare for our future. Again, I think this reverse budgeting method, this is what I love personally. I think that could help a lot of you that are sort of like, hey, I don't want to track every dollar. I don't want to go crazy on these budgeting apps or stuff money in an envelope, but I do want to create a framework of what are my goals, and I want to allocate those dollars for my goals first, and then just let my lifestyle just happen. Okay. All right. The fourth method is the zero-based budget method. All right. Now, it's got some similarities here, to the cash stuffing method. But essentially what this is, I think the main difference in my takeaway, and I'll probably butcher this too, if you're like a YNAB nerd, YNAB stands for you need a budget. But essentially what this is, it's like a zero-based budgeting system. So every month or every period, whatever you're tracking, everything starts at zero, and you must set a target for each spending category that you have. Okay, so it's like the traditional method. I'll kind of compare it to a traditional method is like, hey, looking backwards, I spent $5,000 a year on travel or $5,000 a year on hotels. Whatever. I'll just use that as an example. Well, this year, I'm going to just give it a nominal inflation raise. Maybe it's 3% or whatever it might be. And so therefore, this year, I'm going to spend $5,000 and a couple $100 on travel or on hotels. So that would be the traditional method. Whereas the zero-based budget is like, no, that goes to zero. Whatever you did in the past, it is what it is. I'm going to set a target this year for X, whatever that is. Okay. So it essentially heightens the scrutinization process. I don't even know if that's a word for each spending category. All right. And I like that. I like this idea of scrutinizing each category. And so, you're not just going to sort of have things on autopilot, like even businesses use this type of budgeting method as well, the zero-based budgeting method, because like, the old school thought is like, okay, whatever our expenses are, let's just increase that as, by inflation. And that's going to be our projections for this upcoming year. It's like the zero-based budget is like, no, let's take a time out here. How much value is this expense providing to us? If it's providing a lot of value, maybe you leave that alone. Maybe you actually put more into that particular category. But if you're like, hey, travel was $10,000 last year, but half the trips we took were seeing family members and friends that we don't really even like seeing. Like, what are we doing? Like, let's scrutinize that. Maybe we cut our travel expenses this year and just maybe do one of those trips to see, some family members and friends that we really, really want to see. And the rest we'll do on discretionary travel that we want to do. So I really like this idea of scrutinizing. And there are some apps that are great out there. I mentioned YNAB. I mentioned Good Budget. Every Dollar is another one as well. But there's a lot of great apps. And I'm going to recommend all of you just find something that works. I think the one that we used to use, back in the day, mint.com, that's no longer available, but there are some great options out there. I personally, with my family, we use an app called Monarch Money, and it's super great. I love it. It's easy to use. It link your accounts. It starts tracking your spending. It categorizes everything starting really from 6 months prior, I believe. And then it starts to go in and then you start to create categories. It'll actually auto create categories initially and throw what they think your expenses, where they will fit. And then you can edit those and create rules. Okay. And you can say, hey, this is a entertainment expense, or this is a housing expense, or this is a utility bill. So you can kind of train it to know what those expenses are that are coming in to the data feed. And ultimately, what I do personally is every day, okay, this is a little crazy. Some of you may not want to do this, but I approve every transaction that comes in. And so it kind of gives me that frame of reference of like scrutinizing every transaction. All right. And so it is very similar to the YNAB philosophy in terms of zero-based budget, because I'm going to look at this expense that's coming in. I'm like, well, what's going on here? Like some of these subscriptions that we have, like with home gyms, remember in 2020, everyone was like working out from home. Like some of these we're still paying for. I forgot. Like we actually have a gym membership now. I'm like, what's going on here? So I love using apps, using technology, using using the tools that we have at our disposal to really automate things a little bit better. So you're not doing it on the back of a napkin. And truthfully, I like Excel in terms of like, hey, let's export all of our expenses and kind of see what's going on. So you own the budget a little bit more. But I've definitely sort of come to realize, hey, a budgeting tool is better for me. I'm busy. I've got my business. I've got this podcast. I've got my family. I do want a little free time here and there. So me sitting down and updating my Excel sheet every month, not really what I want to be doing. So all of these apps, very, very affordable. So check it out. Quicken, that's another very, very popular one. Empower, they have an app. Personal Capital. So there's a ton of options out there. So kind of figure out what works for you. I also love Monarch Money as well because we can actually have our clients share the data feed with us. Okay. So what they do is they'll sign up and they'll say, hey, I work with an advisor. I want to share my data feed. And I have a professional dashboard on a Monarch Money. And I can see their expenses as well. And I can kind of help them think through, hey, what is this category? Is this a need? Is this a want? Is this a wish? And that actually sort of helps us with those retirement planning projections going forward into our financial planning software and tools that we use. So Monarch Money is really cool. Actually, if you're working with an advisor that has hooked up to Monarch Money as a professional, you can share that data feed with them as well and sort of get on the same page with your financial planner. But hopefully that helps. And last but not least, I want to kind of talk through a few tips here. Now, once you've sort of gotten clarity on your cash flow, where are the dollars going? You've scrutinized your budget and you say, hey, these are our goals that we want to set going forward. Here are our savings goals. I want to give you a few things to kind of think through as you're starting to project forward in retirement. I think the first thing I want to throw out there is this idea of spending stages. Okay. As I've talked about this on the podcast before, we talk about it ad nauseum with our clients, but this idea of you're not going to just increase your expenses every single year with inflation. That's just not how retirees operate. Typically, what we've experienced in PFR Nation, this is going to resonate with you. In that beginning phase of retirement, you're probably doing a lot more. Every day is Saturday. Okay. You're doing a lot more travel. You're hitting those bucket list trips. And so you might actually have an increase in spending. A lot of times it's on those wants and wishes in that early phase of retirement. We call that the go-go years. And then at some point, no one has a crystal ball. At some point, you might slow it down a little bit. And this is what we call the slow-go years. And then the later phase of retirement would be the no-go years. And so we've talked about this on the podcast of like not underspending in the go-go years in retirement is so critical and something we advocate so much for our clients. And we try to be in their corner to almost kind of give them permission to spend, because oftentimes when they're transitioning to retirement, they're sort of in the saving mode. It's very uncomfortable for them to start to dip down in the portfolio, but have this frame of reference of spending stages and kind of think through the fact that, hey, you're not going to just like coast in terms of increasing your expenses over time. If anything, your expenses probably will go down a little bit. But then the second point I'll throw out there is this idea of a spending smile. So, if you're watching a video, we start here with expenses because, you're enjoying life, But then you might start to slow it down a little bit in the slow-go years. But then at the end, in those no-go years, expenses might go up for healthcare costs. So making sure you have a plan, particularly for healthcare, particularly for long-term care expenses, that will sort of protect the budget if something were to happen later on in your retirement, in your later years. So again, spending stages, spending smile, the framework of the needs, wants, wishes. And I'll say just in addition to this is like, just have a buffer in there, for your budget. Like I hear this all the time with clients, like, oh, Kevin, unexpected things came up this month or this year. We spent a lot more. I'm like, there's always unexpected expenses that are come out. You just don't know which one it's going to be. Is it a healthcare event? Is it a home repair? Is it a new car? Whatever that might be. So have a budget that's sort of like, hey, this is sort of like our new car budget every few years. This is our home repair budget that we're just going to build into our projections. And then, of course, long-term care, have that stress tested as well. Like, are you going to buy long-term care insurance? Are you going to self-fund? And so have a plan not only for your needs, wants, wishes, but also for some of these unexpected that are going to come up in retirement. You just don't know when that's going to happen. So hope you guys found this helpful. I think once you get this framework down, okay, it's going to help drive some of these decisions, around starting Social Security, around your rate of withdrawal on your portfolio, around how much risk you need to take with your investments, around what accounts you're going to tap into first. Is it going to be the taxable bucket first, the tax deferred next, the tax free at the end? Do you want to preserve assets for your heirs, or do you want to maximize spending in retirement? I think there's so many places you can go once you have that clarity, once you have that confidence in your budget. And I hope this kind of gets 2025 kicked off in the right way. And make sure to share this. If you found this helpful, of course, make sure to follow the show, make sure to give us a 5-star review, but make sure to share this with someone else that you feel like would find value in what we're doing here. Someone who's sort of like a PFR Nation caliber type of individual, and just share this with them, because, I feel like The algorithm is starting to pick up a little bit in terms of the type of people we are going to deliver our message to and who's going to find the most value here. And so I think the algorithm is starting to pick this up in the podcast and even on YouTube. But make sure to do me a favor, just share this with someone else. We don't charge for this podcast. We're not paying anything. So like leaving a 5-star review and sharing it, it's just kind of like a thank you to say, hey, Kevin, appreciate all you're doing. Here's our token of appreciation. So again, I appreciate all of you for listening. Let's go on this journey where I'm super excited to be coming in every week and talking about a certain topic. And we're going to really mostly tie these topics into our financial planning practice. So like a lot of what we're talking about right now with our clients is cash flow and budgeting. And so next week, I'm going to be talking about this idea of giving yourself a raise in retirement. And like, did the markets warrant a raise for retirees in 2025? So I'm going to hit on that one. It's going to be a really, really nice topic. A lot of people have heard about the 4% rule. And so we're going to talk through, hey, what does it make sense? You know, what kind of raise does it make sense to give yourself in 2025 if you're retired or even if you're near retirement? And again, I mentioned this earlier, but if you are interested in working with my firm one-on-one, make sure to check out that retirement readiness questionnaire, the RRQ, in the show notes, and just start there. You know, just fill out some basic information. Say, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Here's a general idea of what my financial situation is, and I'll follow up with a personalized video on our initial thoughts and how we might go about tackling an engagement if we were to work together. That's it for today, everybody. Until next time, this is Kevin Lau signing off.